I'm an interdisciplinary scientist, so what I will do, I'll present what we call in English a big picture, what goes into it and what works and what doesn't. I'll talk without any pictures for about 20 minutes and then I'll show some images. Perhaps the most important thing to realize is that most of the stuff you read about immigration is wrong because it starts with preconceived ideas. People made the conclusions before they started to write or talk about it. And basically it falls into these two natural big groups. It's very good or it's very bad. The economists like the good side. Immigrants come in, they take the jobs which the locals don't want to do. They are hardworking, they have a high savings rate, they want to better their future, so they want to buy all these refrigerators and furniture and houses, and so they are boosting up the economy. Give me more. Everything is good about immigration. Then there are the people like politicians, social scientists, sociologists, political scientists, and they say, well, you know, there are the others. They bring the problems, they create uncertainty, they don't want to integrate. It's not such a good story. And of course, the other people who are sensible and rational, and they say this is a complex affair. It has good things and it has bad things. It's a very mixed picture. But I want to tell you something more. I want to tell you that we cannot say how mixed the picture is. It is mixed, there is no doubt about it. And having benefits and having drawbacks, that's the normal thing in complex systems. But in this case, I'll submit to you and I'll try to argue strongly that we cannot say what is the net balance of it. Let me give you a perfect example of difficulties of establishing balance, yet nevertheless it's doable. It's not like in physics and chemistry, where the results are absolutely predictable. This is not a hard science. In biology, it's much softer because organisms have a great variety of responses to environment and great plasticity of behavior. But nevertheless, even in biology, we cannot make the detailed prediction, but we can be very probabilistic. Let me give you one common probabilistic example. If you have certain factors contributing to heart disease, like age, smoking, family history, it might be good for you to take a little aspirin every morning, right? But we know that taking aspirin has risks because it may increase, stomach bleeding, so on. But we know what the probabilities are because we have studied hundreds of thousands of people, and we can tell you that if you have these preconditions of heart disease, that you have X chance to die prematurely. If you take the aspirin, you have a Y chance to have an undesirable side effect. So you can weigh X against the Y and you can decide what to do. Now, this is what we cannot do with immigration. We cannot say this is X positive and this is Y negative. Why? Because neither the X's or Y's are easily measurable. A very common argument which you hear among economists is that immigrants take the jobs which the locals don't want, while people counter-argue saying, aha, but they depress the wages at the same time. How do I measure this? You can't. This debate is now very, very high in California, right? But because this is the #1 Latino immigration state in the United States. But how could you really establish the effect of depressing wages in California? The only way you could do it is that you would have to run two Californias. One California without any Latino immigration, run it for 5 years and see what the wages will do, and one California with Latino immigration. But to calculate the effect today, you must make many assumptions, really, right? Maybe if I would have California without Latin immigration, the people would be forced to increase the pay for the jobs of picking lettuce or picking cherries. And people would be willing to do it for $15 per hour. But because I have 500,000 or 1 million Latinos who are willing to do it for $5, I will never know what is the real effect of that thing. It's much subtler, but even more difficult in social response. There is a very interesting British study published just last year, which shows that even if people live in the environment where there is a large share of new immigrant population, but there has been no increase in crime, so these people have no reason to feel unsafe, they still feel less secure. because they feel the presence of too many of the others. Really. It's a very subtle thing. How do you quantify it? How do you measure it, right? You could measure the increase in crime, but in those neighborhoods, there was no increase in crime. There was no, the property, the house values didn't go down. That's one thing how you could measure the uncertainty. So there is nothing you can latch it on, just the feeling. How much is the feeling worse? So we have similar experiences, okay? Asthma is the fastest increasing disease among children around the world. How do you measure the value of asthmatic attack? You can take the child to hospital, you can say, okay, the child has been seen by a nurse, by a doctor, spent 1 hour in hospital, been administered these drugs, so you can put the money value on it. But how about the anxiety of the child having asthmatic attack and anxiety of the children taking the child to hospital? These things are not measurable. So how do you measure the feeling now, you know, I've been in this house for 20 years. Now there are all these new immigrants around. They haven't caused any crime, but still I feel less secure. Maybe I want to move. Maybe I don't want to stay. So there are many of these variables, no matter if they are economic or if they are these sort of behavioral, environmental variables, which we cannot measure. But there is even more important thing about immigration, which people always forget about. It has a very important time dimension. And it changes very dramatically. You never heard about any problems about immigrants in Netherlands 30 years ago. There were quite a few immigrants in Netherlands. In Rotterdam, which will be now the, if it already isn't, it will be within a few years the first majority Muslim city in that part of Western Europe. There were already many Muslim immigrants 20, 30 years ago. It wasn't a problem. Until the number of those immigrants reached a critical mass, at which point the Dutch decided, we don't like that amount. We don't like that lack of integration into our society. Right? Even 10 years ago, you heard very little about it. But last 10 years, Netherlands has been preoccupied by immigration, particularly by the Rotterdam problem. Most of you who don't pay attention to Africa, you probably didn't even hear that South Africa is full of immigrants. South Africa has been always full of legal and illegal immigrants. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, half of the workers in gold mines in South Africa, even quarter century ago, were people from Zimbabwe, from Botswana, from Zambia. Right? What has changed? Nothing has changed in the sense, these people are always present in large quantities. What has changed? Well, the economic situation in South Africa is not very good. And the local people have now the feeling that the others are taking their jobs away. And they go and they kill them in the streets, as you've seen in the past week. So a large number of immigrants from other South African countries have been no problem in Africa, South Africa 10, 20 years ago. They are a major problem right now. And you can go down this list just for about every country with large immigration problems. In 1970s, Latino immigration to US was basically a matter of workers' rights. Cesar Chavez and so on, let's give us decent wage and let's give us decent sort of, health protection, whatever. It was not a problem. There are too many of them and they are taking over. But in past 10 years, and especially in past 2 years, until last maybe 6 months when the economic issues are now rising to be number one in US, but certainly in 2005, 2006, that was the number one problem in the US politics. Suddenly the US, politicians, public opinion decided this is our number one problem. It's not now because the economics isn't to the top, and I have no idea where it will be 3 years or 5 years from now. So these things fundamentally change with time. It just doesn't remain stable. So it's very difficult to make that net equation. If I would be making a decision, should I bring more immigrants or shouldn't I? Will it be good for my country over the next 5, 10, 20 years? The answer is I don't know, because it's very complex, largely unmeasurable, and very dynamic, and perception change really, right? So this is a very, very fundamental problem. Other thing when you study immigration is that the experience of one country is not at all transferable to another country. These things are very, very much country specific because there are many reasons for immigration. It's always the same. It's a push factor, which is pushing people out from where they live, and it's a pull factor, which is bringing people in, right? But these push and pull factors are very different. You would think that poverty is the most common push factor. So it is, but there are very different levels of poverty. Some people are truly desperately poor. Some people are only relatively poor. Right? Most people in Europe don't think about environment. They would think environment, oh, global warming, sustainability. The state of environment is one of the most important push factors for immigration in many places in the world. If you live in Bangladesh, maybe you've never thought about it, but this is one of the greatest immigration streams on this planet. Bangladesh is moving to India, especially the state of West Bengal. So the state of environment, simply the sheer density of people and the lack of arable land, that's on a big push factor in Bangladesh. Civil war. Sudan, because of the civil war, which lasted, I mean, it's still not over, but which started in 1956 and basically lasted half a century. There's been a very major push factor from people from Sudan to surrounding African countries and to Europe. As far as the acceptance of immigrants and the integration of immigrants, that is extremely unpredictable. We have very interesting studies which show this American fear that, you know, the other immigrants came and they integrated very rapidly, all these Italians and Poles and Jews. But Latinos, they don't integrate rapidly because they are right next door. They keep coming back home to Nicaragua, Mexico. It's not it's a different kind of immigration. It's wrong. We have very interesting studies to show that even in San Diego and in Los Angeles, the heart of Latino immigration, it takes about 2.5 generations, just a half generation longer than for other immigrants to integrate. After 3 generations, the children don't speak Spanish. It's just a little longer. It takes them a little longer. But, you know, they do integrate, really, right? On the other hand, you look at the Pakistani immigration in Britain. They haven't integrated at all. The parents try to integrate, but their children are the terrorists. All the people who bombed the subway in London were the 2nd or even 3rd generation children born in Britain, British citizens. They didn't come from some training camps in Waziristan in northern Pakistan. So some people integrate, some people don't. Some people integrate very rapidly, some people integrate slower but still integrate, some people don't integrate at all. And you cannot make that bet ahead. Those people who came to Britain from Pakistan in 1950s, they tried to integrate as rapidly as they could, really. Their children and their grandchildren are going backwards, really. So you never know. So that's another, you know, the strong argument to say that you cannot balance it. You cannot make the net prediction saying, you know, will it be good, will not be good. As for Spain, let me tell you a few things about Spain. Again, you know, the contradictions are quite there. Many people tell you, oh, this is great. Spain is unique. Spain is handling beautifully. Immigration is great. No problem. We are pushing on 15% of foreigners. We have no problems. How comes then that 40% of Spaniards think that immigration is a real problem, right? So politicians tell you one thing, public opinion tells you another thing, really, right? You've been lucky because, of course, partial luck and partial it's the choice and management, whatever, that the bulk of the migration is the people of the same face and the same language, right? Makes a great difference if you are Peruviano, Boliviano, and if you come to Spain, as opposed if you come to Spain from Mali or from Pakistan, really. But again, it is that critical mass. When there will be 40% of them and 60% of you, maybe you will view it differently, right? It's all unpredictable. Let me show you some pictures to illustrate some of these things. Okay, this one is the one which, if I would be a Spaniard, would make me shudder. It took other countries 200 years to go through what we call the demographic transition. High birth rate, high death rate, to low birth rate, to low death rate. Spain did it even faster than Italy. There is no other country which has gone so fast through demographic transition as Spain. So basically now you are at that level, which is a death level. The replacement fertility is 2.1. You need 2.1 children at least to replace the next generation. If you fall down to 1.7, 1.8, there is always a hope that you can go back to 2.1, right? This happened to US, other countries, Sweden. Once you fall below 1.4, we notice that there is no hope. It will never go up because the whole new generation of people is growing up. Many of them will never marry. Most of them who will marry will not even have children, and so on. So Spain and Italy, together with Hungary, Czech Republic, and Japan, is in this category of no hope, right? There is no hope. Spaniards, like Czechs, like Hungarians, like Japanese, like Russians, are a nation which is slowly but surely dying out. Now, it's a big nation, so is Russia. You know, 100 million, 150 million people will not die overnight. But percentage-wise, these are very rapid drop-offs, really, right? So maybe all these debates about immigration are useless because you will have to have them, because you will have no choice. Americans are replacing themselves. Americans could do without Latinos. Americans have a fertility basically 2.1. They are the only still demographically dynamic modern nation. They are still replacing themselves. Not we in Canada. We rely on immigration, right? But you will have no choice, right? And Japanese will have no choice as well. Because you cannot have an economy where there is one working person for 4 retirees, right? And this idea that people will live long, people will be living longer, so they'll be working longer, this is a non-starter. Maybe, a lady taking Japanese tourists through Prado, she could do it at age 75. But not repairing the sidewalks, right? Not mining iron ore, really, right? Not smelting the steel, right? No. You need people of the working age, 25, 35. So this idea somehow that Europe will kind of go over this age problem by working longer, it's not going to work, really. So this is a frightening picture which all Spaniards should hang on their wall and think of it. Here we go. This, of course, as Europe as a whole, this is another picture which tells you where most of the immigrants inevitably will come from, right? This is what is so-called Muslim hinterland, and this is the European Union, other European countries, and you see the preponderance of population there. This one?
No.
Okay. Now, this one is more interesting because this one shows you the fertility rate. You see that in most of the African countries, sub-Saharan countries, the fertility is more than 4 children per female, right? And you see that Europe as a whole is below replacement level, except for Albania. Albania is the only country, Muslim country, by the way, which is replacing itself, really, right? So inevitability of Europe over long term, right, over the next 50 years, that Europe will receive bulk of its immigration from Arab and sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? Just too close, it's natural, pull-push factor, it's inevitable, right? So it's not a matter of next 5 years, but it's a matter of next 50 years. In long run, everything is demography. You cannot defeat and change demography in long run. So this is another picture. If I would be a European, I'm a former European, I left this continent 35 years ago, this is the picture which I would contemplate every night. This is the future of Europe. It's inevitable. Okay, one more. This is why Americans don't like Latino immigration, because there are whole groups in California who say, Reconquista de Aztlán, really, right? This doesn't sit very well with American citizens, really, right? We are taking it all back, really, right? So, all sorts of sensibilities are railed by pictures like this, really, right? So, this is not official position of Mexican government, but actually not quite far from it, really, right? Okay. This is what I talk about, the environmental image, that here's the Bangladesh and the India, West Bengal. All you need, forget about the sea level rise because of global warming, like 2 meters or 3 meters. In Bangladesh, all you need is maybe like 20 or 30 centimeters, which means that during the cyclone, already during the heavy cyclone now, half of the Bangladesh is underwater. With just 20 or 30 centimeters more water during the storm surge, during typhoon, the whole Bangladesh will be underwater, basically all as you see. And of course, so these people will move to India, right? So one of the most frightening possibilities is having like something like 50 or 80 million Bangladeshis moving to India. So you pray that there will be no serious global warming, because this might be a very serious global problem there. Right? No, let's skip this. Okay. This is the final picture, and this will be transitioned to the presentation by my Japanese colleague. This is what we call the age-sex pyramid, males and females on either side, and it shows you this, the age structure. So when the population is young, it has this pyramidal structure. Most of the population is children and young adults, right? And there are very few old people. This is the picture of Japanese aging between 1930 and 2050. You could construct a similar picture for Japan, Russia, Hungary, for all these Spain, for all these aging societies. So you go from a pyramid to something which is a very small base, basically no children, and the bulk of the people, as you see, by year 2030 will be very old people, which will not be supported by that working population. So there will be very few children, very few young people, but everybody will be old. So this picture, which is specifically Japanese transition between 1930 to 2050, could be shown for every aging society around the world. And so now I will tell you more about aging in general and aging in Japan. Thank you.